Have you ever wondered what the Pope would say about harsh immigration policies and the treatment of vulnerable people in our society? Today, I'm diving into a powerful letter from Pope Francis that's been making waves not only among Catholics in the United States but also among people of all faiths and backgrounds. This letter is more than just a document, it's a heartfelt plea for compassion, mercy, and understanding in a world that often seems too quick to judge and too slow to help. Let me take you on a journey through the contents of the letter, the context behind it, and my personal reflections on what it means for us as individuals and as a society. The letter, addressed to American bishops, is a bold and impassioned call to stand up against policies that force families apart, devalue human dignity, and promote narratives of exclusion. In it, Pope Francis makes it clear that the true essence of Christianity lies not in rigid rules or political games, but in the simple, profound act of loving one another, even those who may be different from us or who are caught in difficult circumstances. From the very first line of the letter, the Pope's tone is both gentle and urgent. He exhorts all the faithful, and indeed every person of goodwill, not to succumb to narratives that discriminate against and marginalize migrants and refugees. He reminds us that every human being has an inherent dignity that must be respected, regardless of their legal status or nationality. It's as if he's saying, look, we are all in this together. We have to care for one another, especially for those who are suffering. And isn't that something we can all agree on at some level? I find myself really moved by the honesty and vulnerability in his words. He doesn't mince his words when he talks about the pain and injustice that many migrants face. He speaks of families being torn apart, of children being left in limbo, and of a society that too often values security or political expediency over compassion. For me, this letter serves as a reminder that compassion is not just a nice idea, it's a mandate for all of us, a call to see the humanity in every person, especially in those who are most vulnerable. The letter isn't just a critique of policies, it's also a challenge to all of us to reflect on our own lives. Pope Francis invites us to consider the stories of the migrants, the refugees, and all those who have been made to feel less than human. He tells us that every individual has a story, a history, and a future that matters. It's hard not to feel a surge of empathy when you really stop to think about the courage it takes to leave behind one's home in search of a better life, only to face hostility and exclusion in a new land. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, but isn't this just another political statement from the Church? And I get that. In today's world, almost everything is political, even our personal acts of kindness. But what sets this letter apart is its deep grounding in the timeless values of love, mercy, and solidarity. It doesn't come across as a partisan attack on any particular government, but rather as a moral call to all leaders and citizens to prioritize human dignity above all else. It's a reminder that the mission of the Church, and of any truly caring society, is to care for the least among us. What really struck me is how the Pope connects the issues of immigration with a broader critique of societal indifference. He reminds us that policies which dehumanize migrants are not just bad policy, they are a betrayal of our common humanity. And this isn't a new idea, it's one that has been echoed throughout history by many great leaders and thinkers. Yet, in today's divisive climate, such a clear call for unity and compassion feels both refreshing and desperately needed. As I read the letter, I couldn't help but think about the many personal stories behind the statistics. Each migrant, each refugee, carries with them memories of lost homes, hopes for a better future, and dreams that are often crushed by harsh policies and unyielding borders. The Pope's words make it impossible to ignore these stories. He doesn't offer empty platitudes, instead, he offers a challenge to see beyond our own narrow experiences and to open our hearts to the suffering of others. I also appreciate how the letter calls on the Church to take a stand. It's one thing for individuals to show compassion in their own lives, but when an institution as influential as the Catholic Church speaks out on these issues, it sends a powerful message to the world. The Pope's appeal is not just for personal reflection, but for collective action, a call for bishops, priests, and lay people alike to become voices for those who have been silenced by injustice. For me, one of the most compelling parts of the letter is its insistence on dialogue. Pope Francis doesn't advocate for violence or radical upheaval. Instead, he calls for honest, open conversation. He urges all of us to engage in dialogue with those who hold different views, to listen to the stories of those who are suffering, and to work together to create a society that reflects the true values of mercy and love. In a time when it seems like every conversation turns into an argument, his call for dialogue feels like a breath of fresh air, a reminder that change begins with understanding and communication. I remember a time when I was involved in community work, trying to help a local shelter that served immigrants and refugees. I saw firsthand how a little kindness, a warm meal, a friendly smile, a listening ear, could make a world of difference in someone's life. It wasn't about politics or policies, it was about human connection. And that's exactly what this letter is all about. It's about reconnecting with the basic truth that every person, regardless of where they come from or what challenges they face, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. There's a part of the letter where the Pope talks about the danger of letting political rhetoric override our common humanity. He warns that when we start to see people only as numbers or as problems to be managed, we lose sight of the person behind the statistic. That really hit home for me. I think about all the times I've seen news stories reduced to cold numbers, forgetting that behind every figure is a life filled with dreams, struggles, and hopes. And it's in that reductionist view that policies become dehumanizing and cruel. I also want to share my personal take on what this letter means in today's context. We live in a world where it's so easy to get caught up in echo chambers and to view the world in binary terms, good versus evil, us versus them. But the Pope's words remind us that reality is much more complex. People are not just one thing or another, they are a blend of experiences, emotions, and stories. And if we want to build a better future, we need to embrace that complexity. We need to recognize that compassion isn't a weakness, it's a strength. It takes courage to stand up for what is right, especially when it goes against the grain of popular opinion. I know that for some viewers, this might be a controversial stance. There are many who believe that strict immigration policies are necessary to maintain national security or to preserve cultural identity. And while I understand those concerns, I can't help but feel that the approach advocated in the Pope's letter is one that ultimately benefits everyone. When we treat people with dignity and extend a hand of compassion, we create a society that is more just, more inclusive, and more resilient. It's not about letting in everyone without checks, it's about ensuring that our policies are guided by the principles of justice and mercy, rather than by fear or prejudice. One of the most profound lessons from the letter is that mercy is not a sign of weakness. In fact, it takes a great deal of strength to be merciful, especially in a world that often rewards harshness and rigidity. The Pope's call for mercy is a call to all of us to be more human, to see the value in every person and to act accordingly. It reminds me of a story I once heard about a community that, despite facing significant hardship, managed to come together and support each other with open hearts and open arms. That story, like the Pope's letter, is a testament to the transformative power of compassion. I've always believed that the true measure of a society is not in its wealth or its technological advancements, but in how it treats its most vulnerable members. And this letter from Pope Francis is a clear, resounding reminder that we need to do better. It challenges us to rethink our priorities and to place human dignity at the center of our policies and our actions. It asks us to consider the long-term impact of our decisions, not just on the economy or on national security, but on the lives of real people who are caught in the crossfire of political debates. Let's take a moment to consider the broader implications of the Pope's message. His words are not just about immigration, they're about the kind of society we want to build. A society where compassion trumps indifference, where dialogue replaces division, and where the well-being of every individual is valued. It's a call to all of us to act with kindness, to listen more, and to judge less. And in a time when the media is often filled with stories of conflict and strife, that message feels more important than ever. I find myself inspired by the Pope's unwavering commitment to these values. His willingness to speak out, even when it might be unpopular or controversial, is a powerful reminder that leadership is not about pandering to the lowest common denominator, it's about holding fast to principles, even in the face of adversity. And while it might be easy for some to dismiss his words as merely symbolic or idealistic, I believe that they have the power to effect real change. They remind us that at the heart of every policy, every law, every political debate, there are human lives at stake. As we reflect on the contents of the letter, it's also worth considering how we, as individuals, can embody these principles in our own lives. Whether it's by volunteering at a local shelter, donating to organizations that support refugees, or simply taking the time to listen to someone who is struggling, each one of us has the capacity to make a difference. It's about taking the spirit of mercy and compassion and translating it into action. The Pope isn't asking for grand gestures or heroic sacrifices, he's asking for everyday acts of kindness, the kind that, when multiplied, can transform communities and change lives. I also want to acknowledge that this is not an easy topic to talk about. Immigration, national identity, and human dignity are subjects that evoke strong emotions and deeply held beliefs. It's natural for there to be disagreement and debate. But I believe that, at the core, we all share a common desire to see a better, more humane world. And that's what the Pope's letter is ultimately about. It's a call to look beyond our differences and to focus on what unites us as human beings. It's a call to see the world not in black and white, but in all its shades of gray, and to recognize that our shared humanity is far more important than any label or political affiliation. Throughout the letter, there is a recurring theme of responsibility. The Pope reminds us that we all have a responsibility, not just to ourselves, but to our communities and to the world at large, to ensure that we treat each other with fairness and respect. This is a responsibility that falls on the shoulders of every individual, from the highest levels of government to each of us in our daily lives. It's a reminder that our actions, no matter how small they might seem, have the power to create ripples that extend far beyond our immediate surroundings. One thing that I really appreciate about this letter is its universality. Although it is addressed specifically to American bishops and speaks to issues that are particularly acute in the United States, the message of mercy and compassion is one that resonates globally. In every corner of the world, there are people who are struggling, who are marginalized, and who are in desperate need of kindness. And in that sense, the Pope's words serve as a beacon of hope, a reminder that no matter where we come from, we all share the same basic need to be seen, heard, and loved. I must say, the more I think about it, the more I realize that this letter is not just about policy, it's about the soul of our society. It challenges us to ask ourselves tough questions about who we are and what we stand for. Are we a society that values human life above all else? Are we willing to look past our differences and embrace the strangers among us? These are not just political questions, they are moral and ethical ones, and they require us to dig deep into our own hearts and examine our true values. There's a part of the letter where the Pope talks about the importance of truth. He reminds us that policies built on false narratives that dehumanize and divide, are doomed to fail because they ignore the reality of our shared humanity. I find that idea incredibly powerful. In a time when misinformation can spread like wildfire and when it's all too easy to believe the worst about others, this call for truth is both timely and timeless. It urges us to seek out the facts, to listen to the voices of those who are often ignored, and to base our decisions not on fear, but on the reality of who we are as human beings. As we reach the end of this discussion, I want to leave you with a few thoughts to ponder. First, remember that compassion is not a finite resource. The more we give, the more we have. Every time we extend a hand to someone in need, we reinforce the idea that our humanity is interconnected. Second, let's not be afraid to engage in dialogue. It's through conversation, through listening to different perspectives, that we can truly begin to understand one another and find common ground. And finally, let's hold on to the belief that each of us can be a force for positive change. Whether you're in a position of power or simply living your day-to-day life, your actions matter. Pope Francis's letter is a call to arms, not in the sense of violence or confrontation, but in the sense of standing up for what is right. It's a call to be brave, to show mercy, and to embrace the kind of leadership that is defined not by division, but by unity. It challenges us to rise above the noise of politics and to focus on the timeless values that have the power to transform lives. I know that these topics can be complex and sometimes overwhelming. But I truly believe that by having these conversations and by really listening to what the Pope has to say, we can begin to build a more just and compassionate society. It starts with each one of us, by recognizing our own capacity for empathy and by daring to act on it, even in small ways. Every smile, every kind word, every act of generosity adds up. And together, these acts of kindness can change the world. So, as you reflect on this letter and on the ideas we've talked about today, I encourage you to take a moment to think about how you can bring a little more compassion into your own life. Maybe it's by volunteering at a local charity, reaching out to a neighbor in need, or simply by spreading a message of love and understanding on social media. The possibilities are endless, and each one of us has the power to make a difference. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Pope Francis's powerful letter. If you found this discussion thought-provoking or if it inspired you to think differently about these important issues, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. I would love to hear your thoughts on the letter and on how you believe we can build a kinder, more inclusive society. Share your ideas in the comments below, and let's keep this conversation going. Remember, every voice matters, and together, we can work toward a future where compassion reigns supreme. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.